And thank you so much, Amy, and thank you all for joining us tonight. October 30th, in that first slide, you got to soak in the beauty of all the snow, and many of us across the state of North Dakota have already experienced this. So we embrace it, right? In the state of North Dakota, it's quite normal that we would have snow fall upon us in the fall, and we are going to just take it all in. I'm Kelsey Bless. I am the Children and Family Services Licensing Unit Administrator, and I started in this role in April of 2022. So it's been over a year and a half. And as I was working on preparing this Reasonable and Prudent Parenting training, Teresa Weisler-Kubel from our licensing unit helped me in looking up details and making sure we had the most up-to-speed information for providers and case managers. We have quite a turnover of case management staff, and because of that, we turn to our supervisors. And so with me today is Lisa Giese from Rough Rider North out in Dickinson, and together we're going to be walking through some of the parameters of reasonable and prudent parenting. And so just to paint a landscape, we're going to be doing a little bit of a popcorn action here. I'm going to talk about a few things, hand it over to Lisa, she'll pull it back to me, and then we'll wrap up tonight within the hour. So if you do have questions, like Amy said, you can use the chat feature. I believe it's open. We'll do the best that we can to maximize on what those questions are. I can't see the chat when I'm presenting, so we will do our best to get back to you or connect you to a case manager after if you do have questions. So ultimately, here we go, reasonable and prudent parenting. So many of you on this call are parents or caregivers. Some of you are case managers, and you may not be a parent in your own house, and that's okay. We have so much for us to learn as it relates to reasonable and prudent parenting. And ultimately, the joy of it is that we all do it different. We have some commonalities. We have some components to kind of keep us grounded in the work that we engage and how we embrace life with small children and middle-aged children and sometimes adult children, right? And so how we embrace that and how we work together is different. And even though it's quite the adventure for you is going to be a little different than it is for me if we live in a rural community versus if we live in more of an urban city. And so how we take on parenting, a lot of it is values and our culture and what we've grown to know. But other pieces of parenting and expectations of normalcy is what's available to us, our access, and what opportunities present themselves. So when we are working with our young people who come into placement in foster care, we recognize it's all about inclusion. And when you think back to days when you were young and really questioning, how do I feel connected to my peers? How come I don't feel connected to my peers? Why do they get to do that and I do not? How can I maintain family connections but not make my foster care provider feel badly? How can I, as a young person, feel like I'm informed on what my plan is, yet I feel like I might not have a voice? And so reasonable and prudent parenting is really encouraging us as caregivers, providers, and case managers in the life of young people to make them feel validated and bring forth that inclusiveness. So they do feel like they're like other children who are in their classrooms at school, or maybe even at work if they're employed as young people. We have a variety of levels of North Dakota foster care, and normalcy and how we apply reasonable and prudent parenting doesn't change. It doesn't matter if they are in an unlicensed relative home or in a qualified residential treatment facility. The opportunity for normalcy is a federal regulation that has been around for years, but ultimately how we apply the reasonable and prudent parenting standard varies based on who you are as a provider or caregiver, and who the children are and what their developmental abilities are. So I'm going to talk about the law quickly because, I can't come to a training and not talk to you about the compliance measures. Part of my role at Children and Family Services since 2010 when I started is to help write the law, rule, and policy for North Dakota foster care related topics. And so when this law passed in 2014, we started embedding the policies here in North Dakota, and we actually had a law passed in the 2015 legislative session And what that law passed for caregivers is some immunity. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But ultimately, the federal changes came because of a law that was called Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act. And when that passed, it was an encouragement and then a soft requirement, right, from our federal partners to really support normalcy in the lives of children and provide these opportunities and allow for that inclusion in what feels like a connection to not only their peers, but to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so when that happened, at the same time, the federal regulation said to states, find a way to support and then protect your caregivers. So what we did in Century Code 5011 is we wrote into the law immunity. So the immunity is really there to protect as long as a foster care provider is acting in the best interest of the child, they are immune from any like civil liabilities. And so we have never had to, knock on wood, we've never had to go down this road, because I think oftentimes we all believe that what we're doing is in the best interest of our children. But in the event that something were to happen, we do have Century Code to help protect our providers who are acting in the best interest. And so I think that's a helpful kind of component and piece to the work that we do. So when this law passed, who was it supposed to impact? The impact was dramatically focused on children in the foster care system, and those of us who were the providers working alongside and with and caring for the children in placement. In addition to that, the qualified residential treatment program, so our facilities, and in North Dakota we have two. So we have Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch and Home on the Range. And so both of those facilities, based on this federal regulation, have administrative rules in their licensing that require them to ensure, as a treatment facility, they have appointed one person within their grounds to offer normalcy opportunities to young people in treatment. Now that could look very different, dependent on where their locations are and whatnot, but ultimately it's ensuring that there's some exercise component. Maybe there's a local art club or whatever the components could be to offer some inclusion and provide that opportunity for normalcy to young people. The goal was not only to offer that like normal life experience, and normal is a word that's subjective, right? What's normal to me is maybe not normal to you, and how we embrace this terminology is important, and we'll kind of talk through that as we continue down this training. But ultimately, we want to empower our caregivers to really be thinking outside the box about what other opportunities might present itself to a young person and how we can help engage, because it is all about opportunity. If my children in my home were never given the opportunity to participate in sports or choir or go and be part of a youth group at the church, what would they be doing otherwise? So they might be sitting at home. They might be, work on technology. They may not be engaging socially. They wouldn't be growing developmentally and emotionally with their peers. And so every household's different. And what our federal partners have encouraged states to do is really be thinking about how we could apply measures to ensure that young people in foster care are given every opportunity that a child would be given if they were not in foster care. So one of the things that we're going to hear more from Lisa about later is how we make these decisions about when and if and how and who, as it relates to consent and permissions for young people who are in foster care under the public custody of an agency. And so we're going to talk about that as it relates to a new form here in a little bit. But what is the definition of reasonable and prudent parenting? So this standard is about sensible parental decisions that maintain health and safety and best interests of children, while at the same time encouraging emotional and developmental growth. And so reading through this, obviously participating in extracurricular activities, cultural inclusion, social activities that would be beneficial to the young person, and weighing out the cost and benefit of emotionally their growth opportunity, but at the same time, their developmental ability to engage in that task or the opportunity that presents itself as well. And so leveraging, and you all get this, you do this every day as providers. You're trying to weigh out, this sounds like a great idea, but, and every child is different too. And so you hear us using reasonable and prudent parenting and normalcy almost interchangeably. And so the sensible parental decision-making is reasonable and prudent parenting, but normalcy is about those opportunities that help us with our growth and give the children some new activities to participate particularly. So what is normal? My house, eating supper might look very different than eating supper at your house. Or maybe you're like a super amazing, great mom who wakes up early and makes like pancakes and eggs and bacon, and your child gets all this like huge spread before they're off to school. My children do not get that. But that's not normal in my house to make a big breakfast before our whole work day. But for some of you, it might be. And so as our young people are coming in and they're placed in our homes, the expectations of my house and your house is going to be very different than what they came from. When they were in their home, and I was just visiting with a foster care provider this week, actually, and the expectations that a child is placed in my home and he's almost 4 years old and he's not potty trained. That's not normal. Well, maybe there's some delays there. Where's the child at developmentally? What environment did the child come from as they're placed into my home? If today is day one, we're not going to start potty training 4 hours into their placement. Probably not going to be a successful opportunity. What's normal as we think about our household expectations and where we're finding that balance on where the children were living prior to their time with us. So might be a TV tray in the living room, might not be a TV tray at all, might just be a plate. And so everything looks different in how we adapt to it. So we're going to do a quick poll. There's a lot of questions on here, kind of fun, but how many of you, there's a lot of opportunities in here, and Amy's going to throw out a poll, but how many of you went to a basketball game with friends without your parents? Just a simple yes or no. You can click on these yourself and just fill them in. We're only going to do a couple. How many of you babysat other people's children before you were 13 years old? So we have quite a few people that have already filled this out. That's good. Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
And these are anonymous, so we're not going to.
I don't know.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. We don't know who's saying what, but I'm going to go ahead and end this poll just for the series of time here. So as we end this poll, are you guys able to see that?
They should be able to see currently.
Okay. So 78% of you went to basketball games without your parents. You didn't have supervision. You weren't sitting right there next to mom in the stands cheering on your classmates, or maybe at your high school. You were in the student section having a great time, and you probably got dropped off at the door and you were told, be out here at 9:15. That's good, but that's not the case for everyone, because developmentally and emotionally we can't handle and treat all those cases the same. One size does not fit all. How many of you babysat other people's children? 73% of you babysat somebody else's children before you were 13 years old. And I think that there's like a shift in our culture, just even in the state of North Dakota. I think I was 10 and I babysat other people's children. Today, I can't imagine leaving my 10-year-old, who's very responsible actually, to care for somebody else's kids. And our supervision guidelines would tell us that's not appropriate. And so as we kind of walk through what is sensible for the children that we're caring for, but there's a lot of fun things in here as you kind of, maybe someday you're going to want to watch this again, or you'll get the handouts and you'll go through it a little bit more detailed, but just being able to like kind of reflect, like, did I wash my own laundry? Did I have to like make my own appointments? A lot of these things might seem like independent living, but in some households, that's how you lived. That was the expectation. And so it just varies dependent on where you are coming from. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing that. All right, so who needs to know about normalcy and the reasonable and prudent parenting standard? So in 2014, when this law passed, we made a huge effort in the world of child welfare to notify our custodial case managers, birth parents who are part of child and family team meetings would likely be aware of this. All of our providers had a training. Agencies that licensed child placing agencies like Nexus Path, for example, schools should know, legal representation should know, and we talk about normalcy activities in our court orders too. So it wouldn't be uncommon for an attorney to be aware of reasonable and prudent parenting. Your affidavits are talking about those if you're a case manager, and ensuring that we are engaging in as much reasonable and prudent parenting and normalcy as possible. So how does this positively, how do stakeholders positively impact normalcy? Just having the understanding, what is the concept of normalcy, just being able to practice it, because all of our intentions and the intentions of this law are good. Intentions are to be supportive and to be inclusive. And as we talk about opportunities, you know, when kids do not want to participate versus cannot participate, and how do we weigh that out? You know, if you have a child who's placed with you and they just struggle socially, they struggle with trying to engage with their peers, and you see them quite isolated. I think sometimes our vision is that we have kids asking us every, you know, day, can I do this? Can I go here? Can I do this? Can I, you know, go to this basketball game? Can I stay after school? And the reality is that is not the case for all of the children who come into placement. They're not purposefully asking to go to a basketball game so they can sneak out and go underneath the bleachers and do some drugs. That is not the intention of young people. In fact, we probably see more children who are isolated, who don't have that connection to their peers. And so us as providers and caregivers have a role in trying to help bolster their social ability and their self-esteem, some confidence. And it might mean a normalcy indicator or a reasonable and prudent parenting opportunity would be that we facilitate at our house a little gathering of some friends. Or do you have someone that you relate to in choir? Do you think that that person would like to come over and maybe we could bake cookies together? Just trying to find ways in which young people can feel connected to their peers. And sometimes we have to facilitate it. So understanding that importance and their age, you know, what's age appropriate, what's developmentally appropriate, we're asking ourselves these questions, and we're going to go through some examples as we get into the next steps here. As we're walking through what to consider, it's really important that developmental factor and what's in the best interest of a child. And developmentally, we're going to talk a little bit about brain development. And we're not going to go deep into brain development. We could be here for 2 days, and it would be so fun to learn a little bit more. But ultimately, what we know is that a person's brain does not develop fully until they're in their mid-20s. And so imagine the 14-year-old who just got placed in your home. When we're considering brain development, it's important to note that judgment is the last function that is developed in our brains. I think we know adults who maybe we would question their judgment. And so we oftentimes have that with young people. So as we're thinking about what they can engage in as far as normalcy activities and opportunities, we want to be thinking about developmentally, where are they as we play out this scenario in our head. You learn as foster care case managers that have gone through PRIDE training, absolutely, but more importantly, the providers that are on this call and caregivers who've gone through PRIDE. One of our competencies is being able to identify those developmental needs and addressing those developmental delays of our young people. And so as they're placed with us, we want to make sure that when a child is placed in our home, we're thinking through the brain development. Also, just 2 examples here. This is a really great chart about functioning and development stages and ages. But for an infant, you know, if we just think about the first column, which is planning, for an infant who's between the ages of 0 and 24, you know, they're looking at a bottle, or they're looking at a toy, and they can see it, and they might have a plan in their mind to grab at it, which is so different than our brain development ability for that 13 or 14-year-old as you get into those teen stages, where they're having to plan out, how do I plan a party at school? Or how do I plan out what is my priority homework assignments? And just the way that our brain grows over time. Now, for some, if they're engaging in planning a party at school, you're like, oh, right, this is amazing. I'm so excited that they have this great opportunity. Or you might be like, oh no, I have to go to Sam's Club and I have to buy these other things and I need to do this so I can help plan for this party that this child's having, because we all get it. It's a busy time in our lives. But this chart also talks about organizational skills and flexibility, impulse control. Impulse control is so significant because we recognize that at a 2 or 4-year-old, they give the example on here that impulse control, if you're 2 to 4 years old, you'd have the ability to play freeze tag. And you know that when someone says freeze, you stand there in that same position and you wait it out until they tell you to, thaw out whatever game it is that you're playing. They all have a little different spin. So your impulse control, you might want to move. It would be so fun to move, but at 2 to 4 years old, they're learning to freeze. At teenage years, their impulse control is a little bit different. They know that if they were to cross the street in front of a car, it would be dangerous. But they also are a little more risky. You remember being a teenager, and how many of you always went to a crosswalk? We didn't always go to a crosswalk. And our kids that are placed in our homes today, they also are not going to always go to the crosswalk and across that road and have the safest choice, because their impulse control is still growing and they're developing. The stages of development here, I'm not going to get deep into, but Erickson's psychological stages, ultimately we want to monitor the appropriateness of age development when we're working with children and how they are weighing out. Go back to your psychology or sociology classes from high school and college, and kind of looking through a child who's 0 to 18 months, developing a sense of trust early on. And children who are in foster care oftentimes have some disruption in their trust. They have some barriers and challenges along that way. But then children who are 2 to 5 years old, developing that sense of personal control, being able to recognize their environments and work within their environment all the way through to their young adult stages, where they're still weighing out decision-making authority. And so as we hop into just another example, you're going to get a poll. And with this poll, ultimately, the questions of age and developmentally appropriateness comes down to a lot of things that you as caregivers and case managers are coming out to question. So attending that school event unsupervised might be very easy if the child is doing well in school, hasn't had a history of lying. And so being able to trust that that child is going to follow through. Amy, did we have a poll on this one? Yeah, okay, sorry. So as we think through, if you're at the age of 15, so here's the question for you. You are 15 years old. Okay, did you have your own cell phone? Just answer it like you would normally. Do you think that 15-year-olds, when you were 15, did you have a cell phone? This is going to age some of us. I did not have a cell phone when I was 15. But maybe the better question is, do you believe that this girl you see on the screen at age 15 should have a cell phone? That's all I'm telling you. She's a female and she is 15 years old. Should she have a cell phone? Yes or no? Should she be allowed to go to the mall with her friends? Very much a normalcy activity. Yes or no? And so answering this is a bit of a trick question. So what you'll learn is in the first example, age 15, she's sophomore in high school. She gets good grades. She listens to authority. She's extremely helpful at home. And she cares deeply and genuinely for her 3 siblings who are also placed in your home. She would like to have a cell phone so she can maintain family connections with her aunt. She's willing to let you read her text messages every day. Does she get a cell phone? Yes or no? Same girl, 15-year-old female, placed in your home, has been recently caught skipping school, soliciting drugs from her friends, and engaging in sexual activity. She has been on social media regularly. Should she have her cell phone? So it all depends on the age and the stage of the child. So there's really no right or wrong. It's just kind of fun to make you guys work at it and do a poll. But it depends on how you ask the question, on how you're going to answer as well. And so in your house or under your case management, the answer, if she should have a cell phone and get to go to the mall, is dependent on typical behavior, stage of her life, and her ability to engage with her peers and self. The child vulnerability, we're not going to go deep into this, but safety framework, just to scratch the surface, safety framework requires case managers to assess the vulnerability of young people. So when completing their present danger and impending danger assessments, we recognize that children are either vulnerable to threats or they're not. And that is not solely based on age. There's a lot of characteristics of older children that make them vulnerable to threats, and not simply because they are between the ages of 0 and 6. Older adolescents can be vulnerable as well. So as we're thinking about reasonable and prudent parenting, we're wanting to apply the vulnerability of that child to our decision-making and how and what we allow that child to participate in. These are some definitions, and you'll get this on your slide deck, but ultimately some of the vulnerabilities as it relates to developmental delays, powerlessness, illnesses, that would lead to the child being or considered vulnerable. I want to talk a little bit about activities and how we get consent for activities. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about our 1040.
Perfect. Can you hear me? I think I unmuted myself. So we're going to talk a little bit about, there is a subcommittee that met throughout the state, several people, and we developed a form called the SFN 1040. And so we're going to talk about that in a second here, but some of you probably have seen the form by now. It's relatively new, so many of you probably haven't, but every child that will come into your home, a case manager will bring you a 1040 and go over it with you. We'll look at it in just a second, as I stated, and everybody signs it together. So if you haven't seen one yet and you have children in your home, you'll see one relatively soon. Any public agency is able to use that SFN 1040. The Division of Juvenile Services and tribal nations, they might have a little bit different twist on the form. They might use this one, or they might add to it or subtract to it or something. So just know that. Each time a child has a new placement, a new form will be developed with the case manager, the parents, and the providers. Everybody signs off on it, and we'll look at it in just a second. So what? Oh, I guess I'm going to do that. I don't think it's, oh, there we go. Okay, so some activities that we get lots of requests on that seem normal for youth, extracurricular activities. So what if you have a child in your home that wants to be on the hockey team or basketball team, or they want to be in band or theater or FMLA or 4-H or some of those things. School-related activities, we talked about going to ball games. What about field trips? Are they allowed to go on field trips either within your city or outside a different city? What if they want to go to prom or homecoming? Working, you know, we want our kids to be independent. Lots of our youth that come into our homes, they have a job. Or babysitting, they want to earn some money babysitting. Staying up late, can the kids, how late can they stay up in our home? What are the rules around that? Can they use the internet and social media? And if they can, which social media sites can they use? Can they use Snapchat? Can they use Facebook? What about driving? Driving's a big issue, right? We want our kids to experience normalcy and be independent. Can they drive? Can they get their learner's permit? Can they get their driver's license if they don't have it? What about attending summer camps, Boy Scouts, sports camps? There might be like a week-long basketball camp somewhere. Are they allowed to do that? Riding in a vehicle with others. Oftentimes, the kids in our home, they get picked up from school by somebody else other than ourselves. And can they go to baseball practice riding with somebody else? What are the parameters around that? Vacations, we're going to Florida for spring break. Can the children in our home come with us, whether it's in state, out of state, whatever? Haircuts, tattoos, piercings. Yeah, haircuts have traditionally been a really big topic of conversation with parents. They typically don't want their haircut while they're in foster care. So we'll talk about some of that a little bit later. Operating an ATV or snowmobile, can they do that? What are the parameters around that? Using a cell phone, sometimes kids come into our home and they already have a cell phone. Am I allowed to let them use it? Do I need to turn it over to the case manager? How does this work? Watching television, are there shows that are prohibited, or movies? What are the guidelines with that? Dating, are they allowed to date? Playing video games, are they allowed to play video games? And if so, which ones are they allowed to play or not play? Skiing, downhill or water skiing. Sleepovers, way back, I've been around a while, so way back when, I remember every time a child wanted to have a sleepover, it was this big production. The foster provider had to call the case manager, and we had to talk to the parent, and it was this whole thing. Well, that's not normal for kids, right? They just want to have a sleepover with their friends. So we tried to streamline some of that. Boating, living in North Dakota, lots of people camp, they have cabins, so boating is a really common thing that foster providers want to know if kids in their home can do. Hunting, the same thing, lots of North Dakota families hunt. Rodeos, that's also very, very popular in our area. Can they go to rodeos? Can they participate in rodeos? Okay, so then if we look at the SFN 1040, like I said, every child would have a form associated with each placement. Age matters, and the permission of the life of the kid, like it could change. The child turns a year older. Maybe there's some things that they couldn't do before that maybe we're going to look at them being able to do now. And the custodial, what will happen when this form is developed? Typically what we've done in our zone, the case manager will sit down with the parents and they'll talk through all these different activities and see what the parent is willing to let their child to participate in. And then the case manager might have a difference of opinion on some of the things. And I guess the bottom line is that we have been tasked with being that child's parent, the custodian, for a period of time, whether it's 12 months, 6 months, whatever it is. So sometimes we will make a decision that is different than what the parents have decided. I'm trying to think of a good example for that. Sometimes we've done that centered around some medical care, immunizations, things like that, where if it's and I'm just speaking for Rough Rider, but if it's a religious reason or something very important to the family why they don't get their child immunized, we certainly respect that and take that into consideration. But if the child is immunized and now all of a sudden they just decide that they don't want to, maybe dig in their heels in a little bit, then we'll talk to the medical providers and see what's best for that child. So sometimes we will have a difference of opinion. So if we look at our example here, unfortunately, we used Chandler Bing. Matthew Perry, may he rest in peace. It's a little sad when I was looking at this again today, but the custodial agency is the ABC Human Service Zone, and he's placed with Jack and Judy Geller. So at the very top, it talks about activities requiring custodian written permission. So essentially, when this form is developed with the custodian parents, the things that are checked here, there's been discussion with the parents, with the custodians, so these things are approved. So if we look at Chandler under operator, he is approved to drive a moped, a scooter, a golf cart, go-kart, lawnmower, and an ATV. And then we have to remember that that's always by law and ordinance. So if by law or ordinance you have to wear a helmet when you drive a moped, then Chandler still has to follow those rules. It's not like, oh, you get to drive a moped, so just go out and drive your moped. You still have to follow the laws and the rules. Same with down below with the passenger. Chandler was approved to be in a vehicle with other youth driving, to be a passenger on a snowmobile, a lawnmower. I don't know if that happens very often. They are a passenger on a lawnmower, but I suppose it's possible. Golf cart, go-kart, boat, pontoon, jet ski. And then for water activities, he was approved to be in a hot tub, sauna, tubing, and skiing. And then other activities that are marked below, medical care, religious activities like baptism, confirmation, youth group. That doesn't mean, since that's marked, that foster providers can go and baptize the child, right? Like all those things are discussed beforehand, and so everybody is on the same page. Leaving a child untended at the home, you know, per age. Trampoline parks usually have waivers that you would have to sign as a provider also. Chandler has been approved to snowboard or ski and use a cell phone, use the internet, and have overnight summer sports camps. And then down below, it talks about photographs. And photographs of the child must be discussed. Prior approval must be granted by the custodian before posting them on social media, things like that. There's a lot of reasons behind that, and Kelsey will talk about that a little bit further this evening. And then if we go to page 2, okay. So there at the top, there's low risk activities, no prior approval necessary. So these are the things that are a little bit lower risk, as we stated, and you don't need to keep getting approval for these things. Some examples, and I won't read all of them, but a school field trip, curfew, going to the movies, hiking, riding bicycle, swimming in a lake, all those things. Chandler Bing has been approved to do by the custodian. And in the comment section is important because that will talk about, I'll just read it here real quickly. Chandler is a very responsible young man. Together, parents, child, and provider have agreed that the areas checked above do not need further permissions from the custodial agency in order to engage. Chandler cannot drive a jet ski or boat, vehicle, snowmobile, dirt bike, etc., as he does not have a license. We did not approve hair care because mom would like Chandler to call her prior to making a large decision to cut or dye his hair. We just discussed photographs of Chandler, and yes, the provider can take photos of him and share with him and his family, but cannot post these photos to Facebook, etc. If other opportunities come along the way, please reach out to discuss. And Kelsey kind of touched on this too, like communication with the case manager is important. If you have any questions, you're unsure, just reach out to the case manager, to the custodian, and ask those questions. Down below, then there's travel authorization. You know, there's a different form for that. Many of you that have traveled with youth in your home, it will, what we typically have, like dates where you're going, that type of thing. Oftentimes we'll put on the child's Medicaid number too, in case there were ever an emergency that happened. Also, some of you that lived, maybe if you live in Beach, North Dakota, and you travel to Yuba, Montana, you know, every weekend or something, there are opportunities to have that put in a form so that you're not consistently every weekend like, oh, I need another travel authorization. Same with if you're in Fargo and you're, you know, consistently going into Minnesota or whatever. Just talk to the child's case manager about that. Youth driving, there's some century code listed here about youth driving. That's also a big issue a lot of the time, because we do want them to learn how to drive. We want them to get a permit and a driver's license. You know, the issue becomes the liability of it. What we do at Rough Rider Zone is we try to get the parents on board as much as possible and have them sign those when they're going in to get their permit or their license, that they're taking that responsibility and liability. If we have a child that has a termination of parental rights, then we'll work through that, because then parents can't sign for that. But and then the permission signatures, everybody signs down below. Uh-oh, did I do something?
No, I think we just lost the screen for a second. So
Okay.
Kelsey can reshare and we'll be all golden.
Okay.
It's a good place for you to catch your breath, right, Lisa?
So that's the form.
This is one of those blunders of technology.
Yes.
You know?
Well, should I just keep talking?
I think you can keep going, yeah.
Okay. So some of the normalcy considerations that we want to look at, like it might be age appropriate and normal for a 14-year-old to go on a Boy Scout camping adventure with guides and parental supervision, but it might not be normal for them to go without any parental supervision, right? You want to weigh out those pros and cons, and some of the things that Kelsey was talking about earlier, like the maturity of the child and the development and all those things. It might be age appropriate normal for a 14-year-old to go to a school football game without parental supervision, or it may not. So some questions that we want to ask ourselves is, has a child had risky behavior? Does a child have a history of running away? Do they have truancy issues? You might decide to let the child watch the game with friends, but you stay unsupervised from a distance. So are you willing to do that? Are there any barriers to that? You have, there's always a parent section. I think Kelsey talked about that too. That if we have some risky behavior and maybe the child hasn't been making the greatest decisions lately, maybe that would be a good compromise, because we want them to be able to go to the football game on Friday night. Every other child in the school is going. I mean, not really, but probably a majority of them. And that's just part of the development of growing up, is going to some of those high school sporting events. So maybe that would be the solution, that you sit in the parent section and just kind of keep an eye on them. Just, being planful and prepared for different situations that come up. And we tell our kids, activity attendance is a privilege and not a right. Screens. For some reason it's not.
And Lisa, you might, I'll run it for you.
Okay, thank you. So then some questions that you would want to ask yourself. Was this activity on the SFN 1040? Did I talk about it with the custodian? If appropriate, have they been consulted? We certainly don't expect most of you to call the parents and say, hey, can they go to a football game this Friday night? Those conversations typically happen between the custodian and the parents. But does the activity promote the child's social development? Some of those things Kelsey had just talked about. Will the activity encourage normalcy for the child? Is this something that is a normal thing for a 15-year-old to go to a Friday night football game? If the child has medical needs, will the child be able to tell others how to help them if I'm not there? So do you know other child's parents that can be responsible and know of the child's medical conditions? Say if a child has maybe seizures, is there somebody that I can talk to, plan ahead, prepare in case something happens? Do I know who will be at the activity? This was always something that would drive me crazy with my parents, because they always want to know who's going to be there, who their parents were, where their parents worked, all the things. Do I trust the child will remain safe if I let him or her go? And has the child shown maturity in decision making? Are they making good decisions? Sometimes our kids make really good decisions, and then they have a period of time where they make some really bad decisions, and then usually we go back uphill again. So currently, what's their status with their decision making? Well, would I allow my own child to participate in that activity? That's a big one. Like, always ask yourself, well, what if if you have your own kids, or even if you don't, if you did, would you let your kids go to this activity? Because again, the normalcy, right? Who will be attending and participating in the activity? Again, who's going to be there? Who are these people? Are they good kids? Were their parents? Will the timing of the activity interfere with a scheduled sibling or parent visit, therapy, or medical appointment? If you have, let's say a child has a basketball game, they're on the basketball team, they have a Wednesday night game, and that's also the time when they have a visit with their parents. Like, what do we do for that? Because all those things are important, right? The basketball game's important and the visit's important. Well, how about we come up with a compromise that the parents attend the basketball game, and it's not the same as having a one-on-one visit, but at least it's a compromise so that the child doesn't miss out on either thing, because they're both really important. Does a child in foster care understand and set expectations regarding curfew? Do they know what the curfew is? What about if there's a last minute change? Do they know that they should let you know before that change happens? And what are the consequences if not complying with those expectations?
I'm going to segue in here for a hot second and talk a little bit about pictures. And so knowing that we only have an hour tonight, we're going to try to buzz through these little examples as best. I mean, the thing about it is Lisa and we could talk for a long time about all kinds, and a lot of this you already know. But I think part of pictures that becomes really complicated is that pictures tell a story. Pictures are a great memory. I am a picture mom, like 10,000 photos on my phone. Like I love taking pictures. And ultimately what our policy says is that providers, they can take pictures, but your 1040 is going to be what helps guide what you can do with them. So are you giving those photos to the bio family? Are you making a book for the child to take with them back home to mom at reunification time to show those, first moments? What is the intention behind the photos? And so we're going to talk and show a couple examples here. But ultimately, the Department of Health and Human Services does not say you cannot take a photo. What we say is that you cannot disclose that the child in the photo is in foster care, and that you must have permission set up with the custodial agency. So we know that there's a lot of positives and strengths around what photos are, but we also recognize in this work that we do that photos can be quite challenging, and they can cause some jealousy, they can cause sadness, and we need to recognize that they need to be agreed upon. So some examples that we have in the school yearbook, obviously Mary Smith is part of the 3rd grade classroom. So Mary Smith is going to be noted in the yearbook, but it's not going to say Mary Smith, a child in North Dakota foster care. The same time, the sports section of the paper is not going to say that Mary Smith kicks the Knights into the a state winning goal. She defeats the challenges of being a child in foster care and does the game winning goal. I mean, we want to really acknowledge the confidentiality of our children. And if they're in a photo and they kick the game winning goal, oh my goodness, how amazing. What a memory. Go buy the paper, print it off, laminate it, and make sure they get that, because that is a huge, amazing opportunity that not all children in our state, in our families, in our communities get to be on the front page of the sports section. So we want to encourage those photos to be taken, but how we use them. Now, Facebook posting. Facebook is a big component of our social networking, but we want to be careful about how we engage in social media. So appropriate to say enjoying the sunshine. Maybe you're out on the water at the lake, or you went to the park or whatever, or they're playing in the snow and it is so much fun at the park. But not okay when a child arrives to say, look how cute our new foster son Johnny is, and posting that. It would be an inappropriate disclosure of the child by taking a photo of them. And so when is it appropriate? When in doubt, you talk it out. Talk to the case manager, talk to the family, go with your gut. If it feels wrong, it might be. And if it feels a little bit like I'm not considering everyone's feelings here, you might not be. And this is just a little example of some photos of what not to do. So what is more noticeable? What feels normal? And what makes people ask more questions? If you were to see these two very, very much the same photos submitted online as a part of a Facebook post, but actually posted quite differently. We want to be very careful about how and what messages we're sending, because I think we're in a world, in a culture, in a social networking, that taking a photo and posting it, even if it's just like lunch or the snow outside, is very common. So putting a little happy face over the child is actually drawing more attention to the fact that this is a child you're not supposed to have a photo of, or maybe shouldn't be posting about. So really talking this through with your case manager. The children in foster care deserve better than that, I think, at times too, as we're really trying to play this out. If the theme of that was trick or treat from our 3 goblins and 4 little extras, it doesn't really scream inclusion to me. And so wanting to really be mindful of what it is that we're posting and how. Now that same picture could be posted. Halloween's tomorrow, everybody, woohoo! And we could post that same photo and just say neighborhood fun, happy Halloween. Nobody needs to know who all those kids are. They could be your next door neighbor or the kids down the block. And so just really talking through, if you have permissions on your 1040 for the children placed in your care, that you're being mindful of that. So talk it out. That's important. And I know we're getting short on time, but I do want Lisa to run through a couple more examples. And if we run over, Amy, we run over. And if people need to drop off, they just drop off. But I think we should get it recorded because there's some really valuable information. So Lisa, we'll crank through the rest of these here.
Okay. So when we talk about normalcy, some examples, and I'll talk kind of quickly, but child allowance. If you look at roughly, if you have a child in your home, 13 plus, roughly 1,050 for the maintenance payment. So earning allowance is normal. The foster care, children in foster care can receive an allowance. And if you're kind of struggling on an amount, talk to the case manager, or what do you do with your own kids? What are the kids doing that would highlight the need to receive an allowance? It would bolster their independent living skills? How much are they earning? Where's the money going? Are they saving part of it and pocketing the rest of it? Lots of foster providers will work out a deal with their kids. Like, I'm going to give you an allowance and you're going to save half of it, and the other half's going to go in savings. Or excuse me, the other half will go in your pocket. So just talk about those things with the case manager if you're struggling. And just to note that 18 plus, some of you have 18 plus youth in your home, that those kids absolutely should be receiving a portion of the monthly maintenance rate, because eventually they're going to be leaving your home and they want to have some kind of sort of savings for when they do that. Sleepovers, I touched on sleepovers a little bit ago, but talk to the friends, just like those of you that are parents that you do with your own kids, talk to the friends' parents. What time can I drop off and pick up? Who's going to be there? What are the evening plans? I know back when I would do sleepovers in high school, we really wanted the parents not to be there, right? And then our parents would call and find out that parents were going to be home, so they put a kibosh to that. But you want to know, what are the plans? Are you staying in? Are you going anywhere? If the plans change, the child knows to call you before plans change, to let you know, hey, we're going to stay home tonight, but now we're going to go to a movie, and then we're going to go out to Applebee's afterwards. This is the change of plans. Exchange phone numbers with the supervising adults or parents. And it's also important to develop a code word, and we'll talk about this, with dating and all these things. But if a child is doing a sleepover and they start to feel uncomfortable with whatever is going on in the home, but and maybe they're just sad, or they're lonely, or they miss you and they just want to come back to your home, but they don't want to be embarrassed about it. An example, the child calls you and says, I'm sorry, I forgot to feed the cat. And you might say, that's okay, I'm glad you called. Your sister's not feeling well. I could really use your help, and I'm going to come and get you in a few minutes. Then they're not embarrassed to say, because how many of us that have kids, we've had to go get our kids at sleepovers in the middle of the night, or kids have left our homes in the middle of the night, because sometimes kids just get lonely and they just want to go back. Dating, talk to the date. What time will you be dropping him or her off? Will anybody else be joining you? Is it a group date? Is it just the two of you? What are your plans for the evening? Do you have a driver's license? And if so, I would like to see it, because sometimes people say that they have a driver's license when they actually don't. Again, if the plans change, call before they do, before you go, and so we know where you're going to be. Again, the code word, a child in your home is out on a date, may become uncomfortable for whatever reason, that they can call you and give you that code word, and get the friend or the date's phone number. Socializing with friends, again, get to know the friends. Where will you be? Who is going to be there? What are the plans? Confirm transportation. Who's driving? What time are you going to be picked up and dropped off? Again, if the plans change, that you want to know that beforehand. And again, the code word and phone numbers, always important to exchange phone numbers. Curfew. It's your house, your rules, right? So whatever your curfew would be for your house, they need to be aware of it and what the consequences are for breaking the curfew. No one size fits all. You might have a 16-year-old that, some of the examples, 11 p.m. would be a curfew. But if you have a 16-year-old that's not very mature, not making some good decisions, you probably aren't going to let them stay out till 11. And just to note too, that sometimes if they're on the bus to Jamestown for the night from Dickinson, they have a hockey game, they're going to get back at midnight or 1 a.m. So there's some exceptions around curfew with sporting events and school events, that kind of thing. And just be informed of what activities, to accommodate things that would be changing. Okay, so going forward, I know I'm talking so fast so that you guys can be done at 7. Make sure that the SFN 1040 is completed with permissions when you have a child in your home. Discuss expectations of case managers and parents, discuss expectations of your house rules, what the child's interests are. What does the child like to do? Just because I'm a hockey family and they come into my home, I'm just going to stick them in hockey, but maybe they don't like hockey. So you have to find out what their interests are and the things that they want to do. Are there any barriers to engaging in those certain activities? Like maybe they really like basketball, but you're kind of like, man, with basketball. Well, if that's what their interests are, then that's what you need to be looking at. And then there's an example, and I think I talked about that earlier. If you live on the border of Montana and Minnesota, whatever it may be, that some of those consents can be, I don't want to say blanket consent, but something that you can have written so you don't have to go back every weekend for the same type of consent.
Excellent, Lisa. And I really like that example of living along our North Dakota borders, because I mean, how amazing is that pizza place in Moorhead when you live in Fargo and you don't want to have to call case manager every time you cross over into Minnesota because you're going to go to supper or you're going to go shopping, and it's just a day trip. And so having that understanding allows providers to be able to make these decisions every day, be able to make decisions that make sense for the child, the best interests of the child, and your household structure without having to call. I had a zone director reach out to me and say, Kelsey, what's going on with reasonable and prudent parenting in North Dakota? Because I think my providers are calling like every day. Can the child ride on the bus? Can the child go to a birthday party? Can the child join band? I mean, all these things that maybe seem simple in our own houses about how we might work things forward, but there's nothing wrong with asking the question. Providers don't want to do something wrong. They don't want to, beg for forgiveness. They're usually wanting to ask for permission. And what this 1040 form is going to do is offer you that understanding. It provides some clarity. And so we want you to really embrace that as we work through the going forward with reasonable and prudent parenting and making those sensible decisions every day. As we wrap up tonight, I'm just wanting to just remind you of some normalcy pieces that are just recognizing those teachable moments. Every child who's coming into your care and coming into your home, it's an adjustment for them. You know what? They might want to eat chips and candy every single day, and candy and sugar and desserts just might not be normal in your house. And so having to adapt to that, having to adjust to that, having to kind of work together to navigate this little road, but also just working on those soft skills, working and helping them recognize healthy eating. At our house, we don't eat candy and desserts every day. Okay, I like that personally, but I get that that's not healthy. And so, but for our young people, that's an education moment for you as a provider, and for our case managers. Teachable moments are around us every day. The tone of our voice, how timely we are in responding. If they have a question, we're not interrupting. Just those simple, soft skills that we're teaching our children in our homes every day as a provider. Sometimes it might be the first example that young people in our care are getting about friendships or respect or being heard about how do I handle this situation, and helping them walk through those. So just teachable moments whenever we have those. And I love talking to providers and case managers about teachable moments. Appropriate touch is another one. Oftentimes we've got blurred boundaries just in general. And I don't know if you've been on a playground lately, but like second, third, and fourth graders, they all hug you. Every time you walk up, they hug you. And that's okay. I like hugs. But sometimes in our work, we know that we could do one of the 3 H's. We can do the hug if it's appropriate. We can do high fives. We can do handshakes. We can do knucks. And I think sometimes with the children that we're working with, based on what their age and developmental abilities are, you as the provider and caregiver, you're going to know very quickly what's the most appropriate and reasonable approach to having this child learn some boundaries when you go to the grocery store after they're being placed in your home, We don't hug every person that we go and see when we're going up and down the aisles of the grocery store. And so helping them understand that. And then obviously our technology etiquette, cell phones and social media is just a sign of the time. That's where we are these days. And so in my house, cell phones aren't allowed at the dinner table. And so we leave them off to the side. You set up your household expectations, and you're teaching young people some good social etiquette by also practicing what you preach. And then independent living skills, this is just huge. So anytime that you have an opportunity to, when you go grocery shopping, explain what it is you're buying. We have a 14-year-old in our home, and she is like a 27-year-old mom. She actually really so often wants to know, what is the sale? Is Family Fare, which used to be Dan's Supermarket, having any sales on these types of items? Because she has certain things she likes. So she watched for ads, and she's really good to have around because she knows what's going on, and she keeps us within a budget, right? So always looking for a good deal. But having and teaching our young people about just simply grabbing their dirty laundry from their bedroom, bringing it to the laundry room. Maybe they don't know how to wash clothes yet, or they're not old enough to learn, but they can at 6 and 7 grab their dirty laundry and bring it to the laundry room. So those soft skills, those teachable moments, those hands-on learning opportunities, which are reasonable and prudent parenting standards and normalcy practices every day. And so with that, I just want to thank you all. There is a quiz that you will get in your handouts that you can take the quiz if you feel like you want to really test your knowledge. Inside this online curriculum, there's also a certificate, but the training center will be working with you on that. We had a number of resources that provided us some feedback today, and ultimately, we stand ready to answer questions of you at any time. Our licensing specialists are so well equipped in being able to connect the dots and get your resources if there's something that you need, or if you have to do a case staffing, to call their case manager and just talk it out and say, here's what I'm faced with, or what's this 1040 that I'm hearing about at a training? I've never even seen this form. So that would also be a good opportunity to bridge the gaps and make sure that you're aware as a case man or as a provider about what permissions you have and what the child can and cannot do while they're placed in your provider setting. So we thank you so much for opening your hearts and homes to children in North Dakota foster care. Thank you, case managers, for keeping everybody organized, and our providers for sharing that love and warm welcome to all of our kids. There's our phone number and email. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And that brings us very much to our end. So watch for an email with the evaluation and the handout from this evening. I do know there was a couple folks who were asking about the recording. We'll have that on our website here in the next few days. But if you have any questions between then and now, let us know. Let the licensing unit know. And gosh, guess what? I hope you have a great November ahead. So take care. Take care.
Thank you.